Good morning. Sorry, just getting our mic on then. We're getting back into the swing of things so after a long weekend away for Easter. So hi everybody. My name's Laura Arlott and I am a skills lead at the Swindon Wiltshire Local Enterprise Partnership and Growth Hub. And that means that I deliver business support for our communities in Swindon and Wiltshire, my speciality being around skills, but also general business support. And it's my colleague.
Hi, I'm Letitia Wright and I'm a business navigator at the Swindon and Wiltshire Local Enterprise and the Growth Hub, giving business support out to all various types of businesses, whether you're from startup or you're looking to scale up within that as well. So yes, and I'm very excited about this because, you know, this is one of the topics that really comes up a lot with small businesses. And it's something as well, especially now as we're just, you know, going into the new financial year, that we kind of need to be like, right, okay, let's kind of get a grasp on it and understand it more as well within that.
Exactly, which is why this is the topic of our session today, and this is one in a series of our Wellbeing for the Workplace sessions. As Letitia said, yeah, it's a super important topic that we have identified in the business community, which is why we have brought together our really fantastic speakers today. We have Paul Fox here with us today to speak to us. Paul is from the Money and Pension Service. And we also have Dave Monk here today as well to talk to us about illegal money lending, which we know can be anything to do with financial well-being, can be tricky subjects, difficult to navigate,
yeah, get through it.
Exactly. And when you're talking about supporting employees and their well-being, this can be something really serious that's happening for them. And also it is a part of work life. This is where you're earning money.
Yes.
And it's going to impact people and how they come into work as well. So we're hoping to also, well, we know for sure that we've also got some fantastic resources so that not just today in our conversation, but following that, you're going to have places to signpost, places that can support as well. In fact, you might see in the chat already that Dave has put in a local contact for the Swindon and Wiltshire area around the illegal money lending and where to go to for that local support, which again is a big focus for here, to make sure that we've got that local support.
Yeah.
So we're really looking forward to it. And so first of all, if we can introduce Paul, and Paul can come on screen and say hello, introduce himself and his subject today. Hiya, Paul.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Letitia. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. The glow has just gone. I don't know what's going on with my camera there, but I look like the Ready Brek kid for those of you for a certain age for a couple of minutes. So good morning, and thank you very much, Laura, for the invite to be here today. It's a really important topic, financial well-being, and what I'm going to focus on for sort of the next 20-25 minutes or so really is what role they have to play in their employers' in their employees' financial well-being, what resources are available to them, and actually how it really doesn't really cost them anything to get involved and be part of this agenda. So I'm Paul Fox, and I head up the government's Money and Pension Service for the southwest of England. I'm in rural West Dorset this morning, talking to you from home. It's an interesting area, and it's something that I think a lot of employers think about, but a lot of employers are a little bit worried about getting involved in. So we're going to try and demystify a little bit of financial well-being and hopefully give you some thoughts and ideas and some guidance as to what direction you can look at. Just for a little bit of background, the Money and Pension Service, we are what's called an arm's length government body. So we sit underneath the Department for Work and Pensions, and we also advise the Treasury on things such as debt advice and financial capability and certain aspects around fraud and consumer protection. And I'll touch on a couple of issues such as fraud in a few minutes' time. Couple of things I think to make clear. The first of those is that our services are absolutely free to access for employers. we are also completely independent, and we are completely impartial. So at no point in the next 20 minutes or so will I be endorsing any financial services companies or products. But what I will do is hopefully point you in the direction of some different services that you may want to think about accessing to support your people with their financial well-being. And maybe it's important as well to sort of define financial well-being. It does not take me at the moment to tell you that we are in somewhat of strange times economically. We understand that when the pandemic came along, there was a huge financial tidal wave that came along with that. It impacted SMEs, businesses, employees right across the country. And whilst there were some very good government initiatives that came along to support that, those broadly wrapped up a couple of years ago. And with deep joy, we came pretty much straight into a cost of living challenge period, let's call it that. And we're all still navigating our way through that and trying to understand what the next few months and the next year might look like. And obviously at some point there's going to be a potential change of government this year. We don't know what things are going to change. And so really, without that crystal ball, it's important as an employer to try and think about some of the wider things that you can access and you can do to support your people. Financial well-being probably means different things to different people, but in short, it's about feeling financially resilient. It's about being more confident with money, and it's about feeling more empowered about money. And we boil it down to three basic elements here at the Money and Pensions Service. It's about, can you make the most of your money day to day, week to week, during your working month, your pay cycle? Can you deal with the unexpected? So we're talking about financial resilience in some way, and I'll talk to you about that in a couple of moments. And for employees as well, are you on track for a healthier financial future? And by that, yes, we're talking about pensions in the one space, but for people who are in their 20s and 30s and are, relatively early into a career, pensions can seem an awful long way away in the future. I know when I was in my mid-20s, I was never going to get old, so pensions were an absolute irrelevance back then. But actually, once I turned 50 a year ago, I sort of, cottoned onto the fact that, hang on, it's a lot closer than it once was. So there are various workplace initiatives that you can put in place to support financial well-being and really help to change people's relationship with their money and their pensions, help them develop the skills and the confidence they need to feel more in control of their financial future. If you go back to the mid-70s for a minute, health and safety in the workplace came into being. And about 10, 15 years ago, employers started talking about mental health issues for employees and what support and guidance was available around that. And actually, financial well-being is an absolute core part of that sort of well-being triumvirate, for want of a better word. Health and safety, mental health, and strong financial well-being. But it is something that's been relatively late to the party, particularly for employers. And there's a few reasons for that. Sometimes employers think that, well, we pay a salary, we pay a decent wage, we also contribute to a pension scheme. That's kind of our place, and we're done and dusted. And yeah, that's true in one sense. That's correct. But as an employer, you've also got a fantastic opportunity to help and support your people through various workplace initiatives. And why is it important? Well, if you think about, the UK population today, think about Swindon and Wiltshire, the type of businesses and sectors that you're in. About a quarter of all employees across Wiltshire have less than £100 in savings to fall back on at this particular point in time. So that element of financial resilience for people is very low. We know that about 1 in 5 employees across the county are regularly having to borrow to buy food or pay for their utility bills, and at least half do not have any plan for their finances in retirement. Something that we're quite worried about at the moment is those people, for example, who are reaching the age of 55 and are starting to tap into that tax-free element of their pension because they actually need the money now, but they're not considering in the round what that might have as a knock-on effect 15, 20 years from now when they are actually retired. There are a lot of links between mental health and money, and I'll touch on that for a moment. I think it's really important to understand that the primary worry of your employees at the moment is going to be their financial circumstances, and that's going to have an impact on your business. According to the Financial Conduct Authority, around and about 60% of adults are currently struggling to keep up on their bills. And if you actually extrapolate that across the country, the last figures, which were from 2021, the last full figures that we have available in government, was that we think around 13 million worker days were lost due to financial worries. And absenteeism due to financial stress, we estimate to cost employers £2.5 to £3 billion per year. So it's a significant productivity element to this as well. Around and about 60% of employees across the county say that current financial worries prevent them from performing at their best. And therefore, you know, as an employer, it's an opportunity to do a good thing, do a really positive, ethical thing by supporting them. But actually, it's also good for your business. It's also good for your business holistically. You know, happier and healthier and more productive people, staff are going to feel more valued, and they're going to see you as a more responsible employer. And it's important to do that. You know, there are some benefits around better attraction of people and retention of good people. There are economic benefits for not just your business and your people, but also for the communities that those people live and work in, and the county as a whole. And it does help towards becoming a more sustainable and socially responsible business. And more employees are looking for these elements in future employers. You know, there is a very large facilities company in the country, and they have about 35,000 people. And over the last 12 months, they've actually come out and said, look, financial health is an absolute key component and a key focus area. And it is as important as health and safety that we help our employees with their financial health. And I absolutely agree with that, and it's really great to see employers engaging. So there's some straightforward things that you can do, and it doesn't actually have to cost you hardly anything at all. It's a little bit of time in terms of resource, but actually through ourselves at the Money and Pension Service, you can access a huge amount of guidance, tools, content that you can make available, and you can signpost your people to, that are really going to give them some valuable support. And I think it's worth sort of qualifying at the moment that there is a huge amount of information out there about financial well-being. What do we do with everything in life now? We go onto Google, and your employees are no different to you know, all of us on this call. We go straight onto an iPad or a smartphone to look for information. And whilst there is some very good information out there, including from financial services companies, very often they can be linked to a commercial product, or they can be linked to, you know, signing up for a particular account or a service. And it's also true that in areas such as, for example, debt advice, you are likely, as an employer, to have a minority a significant minority of your people who are probably in problem debt right now, but you really won't know about that as an employer. It's highly unlikely you'll know about that. So in debt, for example, people tend to be ashamed, they're embarrassed, and they're trying to navigate a way through it, and they're looking for help, but very often they don't know where to go. So they drop into Google, for example, and let's say they put in debt advice Wiltshire or debt advice Swindon, something like that. You will get some good organizations come back in that search. Ourselves, you'll get the likes of Citizens Advice or Christians Against Poverty, some really good ethical organizations. But sadly, the majority of those returns will be from commercial entities who want to make a profit or take a commission or sell that employee's details onto an inappropriate debt advice provider. We want to steer clear of that. We really do want to provide that guidance. So what I'm going to do after this session is, via Laura and her team and her colleagues, I'm going to send you over some really good information and some guidance that you can feel confident in putting in front of your employees. Using good signposting and education around money helps build confidence and resilience for your people, and it doesn't need a huge budget or resources. So start small but actually think quite big, and we can provide that resource in for you at no cost to you. It's important to know what sort of things are worrying your employees and actually encouraging them to talk about money. And not all employees will want to engage. We understand that. At the end of the day, you're their employer. You help pay their rent and mortgages and holidays, etc. And some people will not want to engage with their employer and talk about money. So in that case, all you can do is actually say, look, here's some signposting, some good impartial guidance. It's there if you need it. But actually, more and more employees are starting to have these conversations with their employers and saying, do you know what, I'm having a bit of a hard time at the moment. So when you might do, I don't know, you might do an annual poll or a survey, or you might have discussion groups at work, those sort of things. If you're not doing already, perhaps start to think about putting a few questions in there about financial well-being, about the sorts of things that are worrying people or concerning them. And it might well be, for example, at the moment, with prices so fastly rising, and although we know that inflation is starting to slow, it's been a really difficult 18 months, 2 years. So, what's bothering your people around finances? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a magic wand as an employer to raise everybody's salaries. I completely understand that. Of course, that's not the case. But I think there are other things that you can do. So certainly trying to get a bit more out of your employees, encouraging them to talk about money and feeling a bit more comfortable in the workplace, that is important. Have a look at what you already offer as an employer. Audit your existing financial well-being benefits and understand how they respond to your employees' needs. So you might have an employee assistance program. You might partner with, one of those companies that provides discount vouchers or various different things. You might have a cycle to work scheme. You might have lots of different schemes already in place, but it's well worth having a look at those holistically and actually bringing those together in a workplace financial well-being offer, and actually shouting about it. Be confident in telling your employees that it's something that you care about. It's going to be important to them. How do you target and prioritize that activity? How do you care for, to secure buy-in at senior levels of your business? It's really important that your boards and your directors and your senior managers understand that the people reporting into them may well be having some financial problems and they're just not talking about them. And again, doesn't mean that everybody will, but encourage your senior people, encourage your line managers to actually have those conversations, or at least say, look, there is support available for you. One of the important things that you can do and that you know about as an employer is to target what we refer to as moments that matter. and make support accessible around that. And by moments that matter, that can mean lots of things to lots of people. But it could well be, for example, that you know somebody is heading off on maternity or paternity leave. So there is an opportunity there that you might have some guidance available, you know, via ourselves about what the financial things people might want to think about in the next 12 months look like. It may be that you know that an employee is trying to buy a house or is a couple of years away from retirement. All sorts of different reasons that you can utilize. You might have this information via payroll, you might have it through focus groups or feedback or surveys. Decide if you need to use an external provider. You know, there are obviously commercial entities who will come in and want to try and support your employees and your business. What I would suggest on that is please do your homework. There are some good companies out there with some broadly positive initiatives, but there are also downsides to things like, for example, earned wage access. I don't know how many of you might be familiar with that term, but there are companies now who will partner with a business to allow employees access to money that they've already earned, but actually before the end of the month. And whilst in some circumstances that can be a positive thing, we do get concerned that more and more employees are actually starting to access that service probably too frequently. So make sure that you do your homework. And if you do need some guidance, if you do need some support, if you're not sure what sort of external provider to party with, then, you know, get in touch with us at the Money and Pension Service. We are here to support that. We have a consumer facing brand. It's called Money Helper. You can embed many of our Money Helper resources, tools, calculators, videos. You can put that onto your company intranet or an external facing website. We have printed guides that you can access around all sorts of things, from some of the basic things like budgeting, for example, which actually many people don't budget, and those that do don't do it very well. They don't do it as much of an exercise. And actually budgeting is the most powerful bit of kit you have in your toolbox to support your employees around their financial well-being. Many adults just aren't confident about managing their money. And so providing that good signposting, that good education is going to help build confidence and resilience. So don't worry about scribbling any of this stuff down. I will get some really good resource to you when I've finished. Just for a couple of minutes before I sort of wrap and let Laura see if there's any questions or any things. Money can be a taboo. Bear it in mind. Money can be a really taboo topic. We're not very good in this country about talking about money, and there are many reasons for that. One of those is probably that it just used to be considered rude. You know, we're British. We don't talk about money. We don't talk to employers or colleagues about money. It just isn't done. And that was true. Certainly, you know, as I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, that was absolutely the case. So think about where people, for example, are getting their financial education from. Where are they getting that knowledge from? The I newspaper ran a really interesting survey last summer, and they polled around about 10,000 young people up to the age of, I think, 25 or 26. And they asked them, amongst other questions, where do you access your financial education? Where do you get your money knowledge from? And around and about 40% of those young people said they got it from TikTok, the app. And that worries the heck out of me. Some pillock doing a 30-second video about debt advice is not where I would want my kids or my employees to actually access good and independent and impartial guidance from. So it's important to think about those things. You may have a pension scheme. It might be, for example, you might be able to get somebody from the pension scheme in to talk to your people. Really good opportunity. What I'm going to do is when I send my stuff over to Laura for you, I'll put my details in there. And whilst I don't deal with individuals, as an employer, I am here to support you. If you're in the Southwest, wherever in Swindon or Wiltshire that you are, If you would like a separate conversation outside of this forum, and I can help you set up and provide you with some resources and guidance about developing that financial well-being offer, please do get in touch with me. I work with a huge range of organisations across the Southwest, ranging from the military. I do a lot of work with the MOD. I work with the NHS, local authorities, and also a lot of private sector organisations. So it may well be that we can put on a session online, such as this, but we can do it around financial well-being, you know. And if you've got 30 people who can rock up one lunchtime and spend 40 minutes doing that, really, really powerful stuff. So do get in touch with me, and I'll make sure you have those details. I think I'll just wrap, Laura, by saying that sometimes for an employer, it can be a little bit worrying for them to get involved in this conversation. And often the reason for that is that it can be a little bit different to health and safety, for example. Health and safety, put on a hard hat, make sure slips, trips and falls are dealt with, all that sort of stuff. But actually some employers are worried that if they provide some form of financial guidance or signposting, if an employee goes on to utilize that, but then makes a bad decision off the back of it, the employer is worried that that's going to come around and bite them on the backside. And I can understand that. So that's why I do work with a whole range of employers to help them understand that actually they're doing a really good thing and they shouldn't be worried about that. As long as you're signposting and providing content and resource that is independent and it is impartial, then you're doing it in the best interests of your people. So it's a real good opportunity. So Laura, I'm conscious of my time, 25 minutes or so. So I will, any questions now, or I'm going to stay on the call at any point, feel free to provide those or pop them in the chat or whatever it might be. And as I say, I'll get some great resource over to Laura after this session that that you guys can access, and let's try and make some good things happen for some of those employees across Swindon and Wiltshire. Laura, back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul. It's so helpful. It's such good advice.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of this whole subject can be something that people find really difficult to acknowledge. Sometimes it's a bit of an elephant in the room, something that you'll think about another day, because it's money is something that people worry about. And I think even, you know, more recently with changing times and such, and sometimes it's just things can become a bigger and bigger problem when they're not just faced at the time. And I think just knowing that there's support out there, like your organization offers, Paul, is just amazing and really enlightening for people. So just getting that message out, and sometimes as the employer, that can be something that you can be doing for your employees. And like Paul says, it's not about not facing it and letting things just get worse and fester. It's empowering your employees by giving them the access to this kind of support. And you said, sorry Paul, you said something about accessing that free advice and support, I think, and there are people advisors there ready, aren't there, to help people? And someone was asking what is covered in those types of conversations.
Okay, so we are the Money and Pensions Service, Laura, but what we found is that any organisation that has the word pensions in its title, people tend to yawn and run for the hills. So what you will see online is Money Helper. So Money Helper is our consumer facing brand. So we have a main Money Helper website, which is moneyhelper.org, and on that website there is a whole range of free, independent and impartial guidance on really any money topic that your employees might be worried about, from budgeting, how to find debt advice. It might well be that you are a carer for somebody and you want to understand a bit more about what benefits might be available for you. Could well be that you're coming into pension range and you're not sure what the next 5 years might look like, what guidance is available. You can speak to us as well. We're not just the digital service. We employ in-house a significant number of very knowledgeable money and pensions guidance experts that's completely in confidence, and it's free to talk to them. Lots of people choose to do things digitally. Of course, they do it in their own time. But for those people who perhaps need a bit more bespoke support and they're just not confident about where to go for that information, then come and talk to us in confidence. It won't cost you anything at all. But it's important that people know that that those services and those resources are available. And there's other things as well. I mean, for those of you, for example, many of the employees that you have will be parents, for example. So supporting those parents to talk to their kids. We have some fantastic resources around financial education for younger people, and even teenagers, clearly, who don't want to have these conversations. We also understand about some of the things. So the next time, for example, any of you parents out there or potential parents, every year the government, I'll leave you with this one, Laura. Every year the government produces a figure that they pull together from lots of different data, and it's the average cost of raising a child in this country from birth through to the age of 18. Are you ready for this one, Letitia? Okay, looking at you
got
here.
a little one, yeah.
Okay, well, the
Hit me with it.
2020
Brace myself.
All right, brace yourself and hold on to your chair would be my advice on this one. It usually comes out in about the autumn for the following for the previous year's data. So 2022's figure came out in the autumn, and the average cost, Letitia, is now £240,000 per child from birth through to 18. I'm a father of two. I'll be absolutely fair. If I'd have known that figure before having had two children, I may well have made a different strategic choice in life, but that's the benefit of hindsight.
I won't be sharing this with my partner. I will not be sharing this with my partner. He's not to look at this. No.
I wouldn't, not unless you want too depressing an evening tonight, Letitia, that's for sure. But no. So, I'll send over a range of stuff, Laura, after this, and there's some really brilliant stuff that employers can access on behalf of their people. And again, there isn't a lot that's free in life, but our services and resources are completely free. We are fully funded by a levy on the financial services sector and on the pensions companies. So there is no cost for an employer to access those resources and that guidance.
Good to hear.
And I think that's really important, because I think you did touch on it. And, as employers do feel a bit nervous, especially when giving any kind of advice, because they don't know where, they have to be seen, as you said, as unbiased, they're just there. But it's great that you've already got those resources ready to go, so they can, start to build up their own little bank of it, so they can just send a PDF over across, and they can say to them, pick up the telephone and talk to to one of your service, anyone who works for you, because sometimes as well it's about having those conversations, but it's nice to have someone outside of the business, if that makes sense. So that's a really nice thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, employers at the end of the day can choose to partner with whomever they want. They're free to do that. But we all understand. I used to run an SME with 120 people in an environmental business, and I know that margins are very tight. You don't often have a huge budget to go and talk about financial well-being and bring those resources in. So accessors, we won't charge. It's just that little bit of time to embed those resources to support your people. That's all it's going to take.
Perfect. And have you seen a change in anyone accessing your services? Has there been any changes, or
Yeah, I'll give you, I suppose, an example just to bring things to life, and it's important to try and bring things to life. Is I do a lot of work with the Ministry of Defence across the region and the wider armed forces community, and they're a large employer, not your typical SME, but they're still an employer. And a couple of months ago, just after New Year, I went up to Wiltshire, to Tidworth, and I spent an hour talking to about 400 serving personnel about different aspects of financial well-being and things like buy now, pay later, safe use of credit, all sorts of things, fraud. By the time I'd gotten home to Dorset, a couple of hours after that, we'd had 4 individuals who had approached their line officer, their line manager, if you like, in the military, and said, I'm having a hard time financially. I'm in trouble. I understand I can get help and support I've just listened to that brief for an hour. Can you help me do that? So sometimes people just need to have a bit of a comfort blanket. We can't help everybody, Laura and Letitia. You know, times are very, very difficult at the moment, but there is always an opportunity for employers to do that bit more to support their people around financial well-being, and it's more important now than ever. So please get in touch if you're an employer. I'd love to be able to help you, sort of separate to this forum.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us today, even though you're not officially working this week. We really appreciate it, and had to have you come along and talk on this subject because I've seen you speak before, and I knew it was going to be so important.
Yeah.
Well, it's got me out of mowing the lawn this morning, Laura. So I'm very happy for that. So I'll stay on the call, and if anybody's got any questions, then please let me know.
Thank you so much. And I think, like what Paul was saying, the kind of the gravity of this situation, and in current times, financially things can be quite difficult for people, and knowing where to turn to instead of letting things get worse. And I think that really segues into our next kind of subject about illegal money lending. This can happen, I think, when people are feeling quite desperate, and knowing where to turn to again when you're feeling like you don't have many options, I think is really, really important. And for supporting your employees, if you think this is something they're going through, it's really serious stuff, but to know that there's someone that can help definitely is what we want to do today. So if we would like to introduce Dave Monk from the illegal money lending team. Dave isn't going to be able to come on camera for us for security reasons, so we will share a presentation, and Dave can speak to us today. So Dave, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much indeed, Laura and Letitia. My name's Dave Monk, and I'm an officer with a team called the England Illegal Money Lending Team. Sounds rather posh, but we're more commonly known as the Stop Loan Shark team, so that gives you a hint about what this talk is all about. Paul covered a lot of the subjects that we get involved in when we are supporting borrowers of loan sharks. So financial well-being, debt, sickness, absence, etc., all fall into the category of illegal money lending and the consequences of somebody making a bad choice, a poor decision. So the illegal money lending team was set up roughly 20 years ago. It's our 20th anniversary come July this year. And it was started off by Birmingham City Council. A small team of 4 officers were given a remit because in the previous 20 years, nobody in England had ever been prosecuted for illegal money lending. The team were successful. More funding came along. The team grew until 2012, when the government took an interest in what we were doing and they part funded us. And then in 2017, they now fully fund us. Similar to what Paul was saying with regards to the funding of MAPS, we are funded via a levy placed on credit companies within the UK. We are known as a government law enforcement agency in our own right, and we are the only team in the whole of England that have the powers to investigate, prosecute and convict loan sharks. And we also provide specialist support to the borrowers. And you'll be able to understand why as I go through the talk. I don't intend to go through this slide by slide. Laura has a copy, and I've said to Laura, please pass it out to everyone that comes along. I'm standing in this morning for my colleague, Wendy Loads. Wendy looks after Swindon, Wiltshire, South Gloucester, Avon, Bristol, etc. But unfortunately can't be with us today because she's on annual leave. And I'm down in the West Country. I live in Cornwall and I look after Devon and Cornwall for the team. So what is an illegal money lender? Well, we have our banks, we have our building societies, our credit unions, our CDFIs, etc., our car finance companies. They all have a license that's been issued by the Financial Conduct Authority, which allows them to provide credit. An illegal money lender is quite simply an individual, a group of people, a business. It can even be an organised crime gang that lends money for profit. So in other words, they're going to be charging interest. They may also add on late payment fees, default fees, in order to make a profit, but they don't have the license. And to lend money in the UK for profit without a license is illegal. It's a criminal offence, punishable by a jail term, and in some cases, a seizure of assets, which are then sold off. But it's got nothing to do with the tactics that they use. And loan sharks will use a variety of tactics. So what do we know about loan sharks? Well, they've been around for thousands of years. It's nothing new. But there's been a massive swap, a trend in the way that they operate more recently. If I was giving this talk 10 years ago, there was predominantly one type of loan shark, an individual, male or female, that was lending money in order to make a profit, but without the license. And when we talk about the profits, the starting interest rate for a loan shark loan is 100% a week, 5,200% a year. But that is not the highest interest rate that we've ever known a loan shark to charge. That is 4.5 million%. So you can no doubt imagine that the people that borrow from loan sharks are going to go on a horrific journey. Now, in the last 20 years, we've prosecuted over 2,500 loan sharks, and we've supported over 32,000 borrowers. We've identified 256,000 borrowers. The vast majority of people simply don't want our help. All they want to do is stop paying the loan shark. The loan shark is going to be the first person that they pay every time they get their wages. As you can see on the screen, there's 3 examples out of 32,000. These are not uncommon. These are not the worst cases. These are typical. The first one's all about a young mum who needed 75 quid to buy school uniforms for her kids. She moved into a new area with her hubby and 2 children. She tried to get a loan from her bank, but was turned down. She talked to a neighbour who introduced her to a friend, and the friend lent her the £75. And in 5 years, she repaid in excess of £30,000 and unfortunately tried to take her life on several occasions. The second example is all about a young guy. He's called Mike. He lives in Suffolk, and at the age of 18, he needed 250 quid to buy his mate's car because he just secured his first job, working in a factory 10 miles down the road on a night shift, no public transport. He didn't have the money. His family didn't have the money. His friends didn't have the money, but a guy in the pub who he used to play pool and darts with lent him the 250 quid. And in just over 22 years, he had repaid £92,424. And he was referred into us by the Samaritans. So you can see where Mike's journey was going. And the last example is a couple that I supported down here in Devon. They needed to pay £300 to a vet. The vet was threatening a county court action. They assumed they would have to go to court. They borrowed the money off somebody who was introduced to them. And in just over 3 years, they repaid in excess of £30,000. And unfortunately, the gentleman who was wheelchair bound was assaulted and hospitalised on 4 separate occasions by the loan shark. So what do we know about loan sharks? Well, the youngest we've ever prosecuted was aged 17. The eldest in their mid-80s. Grandparents running a money lending ring operating across 6 NHS trusts in London. The grandparents' income, £4.2 million a year. Their children and grandchildren were the people setting up the loans, consultants, matrons, sisters, healthcare assistants. The youngest person that we've had to support who took a loan from a loan shark, 14, and the eldest, 93. The first person to get paid every month when somebody receives their benefits or their salaries is the loan shark. That's because of the intense amount of intimidation, harassment, threats of violence, and worse, that's been imposed on them. Loan sharks will only ever lend money to somebody that has a vulnerability. It's the vulnerability that they will exploit to the nth degree. I mentioned organised crime gangs. Not so very long ago, there was a young lad who I was sat next to on a train. I had my suspicions about what he was doing. I had him arranged to be arrested when he got off the train. Inside a rucksack that he was carrying was £68,000 worth of heroin. But it all started with him taking a loan of 20 quid off a friend of a friend of a friend, not knowing that friend of a friend of a friend was part of an organised crime gang setting up yet another county line coming into Devon and Cornwall. Once upon a time, loan sharks only lent money to make money. Now there's a whole breed of loan sharks that are out there. They will be involved with county lines, people trafficking, modern slavery, voyeurism, sexploitation. They will want more than just money in return. They may well want sexual favours. They may well be forcing somebody to work in their business, earning £5 an hour, but working 80 hours a week in order to pay off the debt. There is a whole new tranche of loan sharks that are coming out and about. So why would somebody turn to a loan shark? Well, unfortunately, at the moment, we have the highest level of rejected applications for credit in the UK for years. Nearly 90% of all loan applications going in at the moment to recognised lenders are being rejected for a whole host of reasons. We also have the highest rate of unpaid rent, unpaid council tax, unpaid mortgage, unpaid credit cards and bank loans, etc. Unsecured debt in the UK at the moment stands around £18 trillion, and it's going up year by year by year. So if people need money for whatever reason, but can't get it, then as Paul said, most people will turn to the internet, Google, Firefox, browsers, social media. They could be approached by somebody who's pertaining to be genuine and have a regulated business, only to find out afterwards that unfortunately they're a loan shark. We noticed a massive swing during lockdown. Prior to lockdown, most people were taking out large loans from loan sharks for one-off expenses. So that could be to put a deposit down on a property, to have a fantastic holiday, to get married. Now we're finding that people are taking out smaller loans to pay the rent, to pay the council tax, to put food on the table, to top up the meters. But the interest rates that loan sharks are charging are going up and up and up, as are the grief that people go on after they've made that decision. Hopefully, fingers crossed, this is going to work. It's just a short 4-minute extract out of a 15-minute documentary that was on Channel 4 in October of last year. So, Laura, if you can click on, that would be great.
Click it, yeah.
Thank you, Laura. If you can stop it there, please. Okay, so a very horrific story from that particular guy in Wales, but it's a story that we hear time and time again from the 32,000 plus people that we've supported. So what is the effect of what they've been subjected to? Well, 90% of all the people that we've supported in the last 2 years tell us that they are suffering with severe depression, severe anxiety, they're on medication for their mental health. 37% have told us that they had considered suicide as the only way out of the debt. 14% had attempted it. And unfortunately, down in this part of the world in 2018, a 24-year-old young man with a partner and 2 children under the age of 5 took his own life due to the pressures that he was under. These are the journeys that victims go on. So how do these loan sharks find the next person to lend money to? This is where it gets very interesting. 51% of all the borrowers were introduced to the loan shark by a family member or a friend, because that family member or a friend was already in debt to the loan shark but couldn't afford the repayments. So the loan shark simply says, you must know people that need a loan. Introduce them. I'll cover your payment this month. 40% found the loan shark on social media. We had our first successful social media prosecution in 2022. This guy was an ex-university student. He paid well-known social influencers to advertise his loans via Snapchat. He was based in the Midlands, but he was lending money to people in Scotland, Wales, Ireland, England, including Devon and Cornwall. We know that Gen Z, the 16 to 24-year-olds, are the fastest age group in the UK taking out credit. A lot of them are using Klarna and ClearPay, but we also know that they're being entrapped via social media. So people just need to be aware of how the loan shark finds the next person to lend money to. Frighteningly enough, 14% of all borrowers were introduced to the loan shark by a work colleague within the workplace. The bigger the organization, the more loan sharks operate in it. The biggest employer in the UK, the NHS, has had numerous loan sharking gangs. I mentioned one earlier, the 4.2 million. We're currently investigating one here in Devon that's operating across a few of the NHS trusts in the county. They're using a tactic called shaming. In other words, they are predominantly lending to people in an Asian community where shaming is a big problem. And they are using that tactic to continue to force that person and the rest of the borrowers into paying. So we've got all these different types of loan sharks operating across different mediums, etc., etc. But like Paul said, how can the employer help the employee? Well, there's things that that can be markers. There's things that can be warning signs. They end in something like a high sickness absence due to stress-related illnesses, anxiety, depression. There has to be a cause. One of the things that we encourage everyone to do is to sit down and ask some simple questions. And one of the simple questions that can be asked is, are you in this situation because you owe somebody some money and you're having to pay them back? It's a yes or no question. Now, before I joined the team 7 years ago, I was a specialist debt advisor, and I saw a talk very similar to this about 13 years ago. So I asked over 3,200 debt clients that question. Are you in this level of debt because? Quite simply, because if they are in debt to a loan shark, they will not be paying their rent, their council tax, their mortgage, their credit cards and their bank loans. Now, out of those 3,200 people, I only ever got 6 yeses. But those 6 yeses resulted in investigations. And as a result of those investigations, more than 3,500 people no longer paid loan sharks. Currently in England alone, 1.1 million people are using loan sharks because it's their only method of getting credit. And it's been estimated that these numbers will escalate to 10 million within the next 3 years. That's 1 in 5 of the adult population. It's a problem that's going to escalate. We we know that payments to loan sharks in the last 2 years is just under £1 billion a year. So for people that are working for you, like Paul said, talking about money, talking about debt, sometimes can be a taboo subject. Sometimes it's a subject that people just don't want to talk about. But if they're encouraged to have a conversation in a safe environment, they're more likely to open up. And for those people that do say yes, these are the great questions to follow up with. So if that conversation is started, then these are the questions to ask. How much did you borrow? How much are you paying back? How often are you paying this? How long have you been paying for? Etc., etc. And to give you just one very, very quick and easy example, I took a statement off a guy in Plymouth a few years ago, and these are the questions I asked, even though I knew the answers because I'd seen all the banking transactions. He told me that he borrowed £100 off his mate. He was paying him £10 a week on a Friday bank transfer, but he'd been doing it for about 3.5 to 4 years. So he borrowed 100 and paid back £1,880. And when I said to that guy, why don't you just stop paying, because obviously your mate's a loan shark, and he went, that is never going to happen, because if I do, I know he's going to be coming through my front door with a couple of his mates, and I'm going to be drinking breakfast through a straw in hospital. So he was paying out of fear. What he didn't realise was we arrested the loan shark that morning. And that loan shark had a brand new BMW every 6 months, 5 holidays a year in the Bahamas, and just over £750,000 sat in a bank account, because there were 624 people on this estate paying him 10, 20, 30, 40 pound a week. So if you've had that conversation, what happens next? It's the most important thing. What happens next? We're not the police. So we don't stick a blue and 2 on the top of the car, and we don't drive around to the loan shark's property and say to them, we know what you're doing, pack it in because we're going to investigate and arrest you. We start an investigation, and that is all covert. And it could take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. It could take 2 years in the case of an organised crime gang to actually lead to an arrest and going to court. But the borrower and all the other borrowers that we can identify get the support of a local liaison officer from day one. I look after all the borrowers in Devon and Cornwall. My colleague Wendy will look after all the borrowers in your area. We will give them as much support as necessary. And if it means putting them into a safe house, taking them out of town, out of city, out of county, we do that. That person needs support, and they need support in a lot of different ways. We know that when we walk in, the first thing that we do are risk and safety assessments. We need to know what harm they could be in from the loan shark, but also from themselves. We do not want them to be added to the next suicide statistic list that comes out once a year. But it could be having to negotiate rent arrears, mortgage arrears, council tax arrears, getting in contact with their creditors, referring them and signposting them on to specialist organisations that can give them that additional help that we can't. So we're talking about the Citizens Advice and the Step Change and the Christians Against Poverty organisations that Paul mentioned in his talk. But they will receive that support from us from day one all the way through and afterwards, because we do not close a case even though we get a successful prosecution. That particular borrower can come back to us at any moment in time. So let's assume that you had that chat and that person has opened up. That is the time to pick the phone up. That is the time to live chat, because that is when that person's barriers have come down sufficiently enough for them to be actually asking for help. So we've got a 24/7 365 helpline, the 0300 number. It's manned by the officers in the team. It's not an external call centre somewhere. Everybody that calls us can remain 100% anonymous. If it's a borrower and they want our help, obviously they'll have to give us name and address and contact details. But if it's themselves or yourselves, you have the right to remain anonymous, as you do on our live chat via the website. available 9 till 5 Monday to Friday, again manned by officers in the team. We know how dangerous it can be to be involved with a loan shark, so people have that right to anonymity. But just to overcome an urban myth, we only have 5 instances over the last 20 years from the 32,000 plus people that we've supported of any repercussions happening. Because one of the things that happens when we arrest the loan shark is they read the Riot Act. And one of those features is if any borrower is approached, contacted, intimidated, harassed, that is going to be an extra charge on your charge sheet. We charge separately for every offence that we can prove in court. And the worst case that we've ever known was a head of an organised crime gang operating out of the north of England, lending money to 900 people, and he personally raped 6 female borrowers. But he made sure the other 894 people knew about the rapes, because the word on the street was, if you miss a payment, you're the next on my list. He got, quite rightly, life imprisonment. The other thing that we do after prosecution is we then go after the assets of the loan shark. Anything that we can prove in court was purchased using criminal money. Houses, cars, boats, Rolex watches, whatever it is, we seize and sell. They're sold at a government auction, and the money that's raised, A, helps to recompensate the victims for the interest they've paid on the loan. B, provides money for grants. So it may, again, be something that you would be interested in, is applying to us for a grant for a project. The only proviso is the loan shark message has to be at the heart of it. And we've just opened up a trench of money for this year. So that basically is the talk. It's been a very, very much a whistle stop. Yes, I have purposely tried to shock as much as possible because there is no nice side to this particular loan shark scenario. The loan shark will try and extort as much as possible in all different ways, shapes and forms, but unfortunately it's the borrowers that suffer. The borrower will only be offered a loan if they have a vulnerability that the loan shark has identified, because it's the vulnerability that the loan shark will exploit. So if we just scoot through a couple of slides just to finish off with Laura, thank you. And again. So there's our contact details. The very last slide is my personal contact details. Obviously, I look after Devon and Cornwall. My contact, Wendy Loads, looks after Swindon and all the surrounding counties. And it's her contact details that I've popped into the chat box. So please make use of Wendy. As Paul said about resources, we have a range of resources that are open to employers. And like Paul at MAPS, all our resources are free. So it could be simple things like small credit cards, cards that have our contact details on. They can be posters, they can be flyers, they can be videos, they can be articles for newsletters. If anybody is linked into their local schools, we have Young Money approved financial education packs. We have a whole range of resources that you can make use of. And in addition, if you felt that you wanted awareness talks given to your teams or your staff, please just get in contact with Wendy and she will be able to set them up for you. Wendy currently is on holiday for this week and next week, so if she doesn't reply, that's the reason why. So that basically is it from me with regards to a whistle-stop tour of the world of loan sharks and the world that I work in. But if anybody's got any questions at all, I hope I haven't depressed anyone too much this morning, but I know how hard-hitting this subject can be. There's nothing nice about anyone that's in debt to a loan shark, I can assure you of that. But the floor is yours if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, we do have a question, if that's okay. So we've got Susan would like to know, how would you approach this subject with a team member or a colleague within that? You know how you did speak about you've got a bank of resources, but how would you open that up, basically, those conversations?
Okay, there's going to be different scenarios that employee comes to you with. Now, one of the most important subjects, and you can't get away from it, is finance and financial well-being. It is part and parcel of our everyday life, regardless of who you are. To put that into context, we have actually supported 3 people in the last 12 months earning in excess of £75,000 a year. So it's not just for people that don't earn a lot of money. There will be a reason why they're sat down chatting, and conversations develop. And part of that conversation might touch on money, finance, pensions, debt, struggling. Can I ask for an advance of salary? Why have you taken so much sickness leave for stress-related illness in the last 3 months? Those type of scenarios. And one of the questions to be asked is quite simply, are you in this situation because you've borrowed some money from someone and you're having to pay them back? My experience, 99.5% will say no. But it's the 0.5 that say yes that needs to be explored and reported, because on average, a loan shark will be lending to around 250 people on average. But the highest number of people we've ever known one loan shark to lend money to is 5,428. So when we start an investigation, we have no idea whether we're talking about 10 people or 5,428. But the amazing thing about the way that things have transitioned and changed over the last 3 years is that 88% of all payments to Loan Shark are now done by bank transfer, not cash.
Yeah.
So we identify through banking records who potentially is a borrower. Hope that answers the questions.
Yeah, no, and it actually leads on to a question that I have as well. So have you kind of seen a trend in people accessing your service? So before you did touch a bit on the social media, social influencing and that kind of thing, but is there a trend at the moment that you're seeing that you're getting quite a lot of within your service?
Yeah, we noticed during lockdown that the amount of, we call it intelligence reporting, that was coming into us, so people that were phoning us or live chatting us, we noticed that it dropped significantly. It almost dried up, which means to say that during lockdown, people were using loan sharks but not prepared to report them because they were the only person that they could get credit from. So they were accepting the fact that they were borrowing, let's just say 100 and repaying 200 within a week or a fortnight. But they needed that because they were being rejected by their bank, their building society, their credit union, their CDFI. So we knew that within a few years of lockdown ending, that we would then see a tsunami of reports. And that's what is happening at this moment in time, because I didn't touch on it on one of the slides, but you may well have read, on average, it takes 3.5 years for a borrower to disclose that they're in debt to a loan shark. The longest period of time we've ever known one person to continually pay a loan shark and never miss a payment is 28 years. But on average, it's 3.5. So we're now seeing that 3.5 beginning to come into the mainframe after lockdown.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
that's amazing. And it's like you said, Dave, it is a really, really heavy subject, but I think it's really important that people be aware of it. The fact that I think that probably another tactic that these loan sharks can use is making people feel isolated, making them feel like there isn't any support, that they're completely desperate, they have to keep doing what they're doing. So I think the work that you're doing in getting your message out, and same with Paul, is just letting people know that it does exist, there's support out there, so that people can start to access it and not make things even worse than they are, basically. And I think the fact that you offer such an intense wraparound support for the victims is really encouraging. This stuff is hard to hear. It's really, really sad. But the fact that you are out there doing this amazing work, the wraparound support for the victims, I personally found really, really encouraging. And the fact that you can even take them out of that situation and keep them safe. I think that's what people need to hear, and that will help them to open the conversation. Plus that you saying like the the very minimal amount of anything happening to someone after that person has been identified and that legal process starting. I think if people hear that, and because like you say, they've just got into this pattern of feeling like they have no other choice and something awful is going to happen to them or to their families, when you start talking about the work that you're doing and how well it's working out, that people have been protected and things have changed for them, then people, I think, can start seeing a different outcome, a future for them. But being stuck in that same situation for 27 years or so is terrifying. It's so sad. I wanted to at that point as well, just because we have touched on also a topic of suicide that we've talked about there, which is obviously a really hard hitting subject as well. And I wanted to just say we do actually have a Wellbeing for the Workplace session where which is around suicide and self-harm, and that's on Tuesday the 16th. Just this type of session, if this is something that you're going to your employees to, we've seen that sometimes, unfortunately, that's a result of someone feeling like they're stuck in these situations. So it may be helpful if this is something that is important to you and your organization, something you want to be more clued up on, somewhere you want to have resources. But just to say that will be coming as well as our session next week. All Tuesdays, our next session on musculoskeletal health and mindfulness next week as well. Just to slide that in there. But yeah, my point there, Dave, was just that as hard hitting as it is, I think the best thing to do is arm ourselves in knowing how to support and being, I think another thing that we're getting from these is as a workplace to be open, so that hopefully people can come and talk to you about these things.
Creating that safe environment for our employees to kind of open up and branch. And these are tough subjects, but if we approach them like how you said, like open questions and stuff like that, that's when we can really see people reaching out. And I think it's a great thing as well, that your services are free. Does that make sense? So, this is free. And, we will be sending out copies of this as well to those that have tuned into this webinar. You will get slides as well. But also, if you are watching this on a recording, please drop us an email, because we're happy to share the slides and resources with you so that you can then send it off as well to your employees within now.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So like we say, we will follow up with everyone. We've got resources here. Paul and Dave, thank you ever so much for today. Genuinely, that was so fascinating, interesting, and really feels important. And thank you for the work that you're doing in supporting people as well. We really appreciate you coming today.
You're welcome.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you very much again for the invite.
Yeah, I'll second that from
you.
Paul. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you everyone for joining us. And I can't imagine that couldn't have been helpful, to be honest. I was going to say, I hope that was helpful. I can't imagine that it wasn't. And I hope that has armed you with even more ways to support your workforces. We know that the workplace is really a primary area of focus to get really important messages out. We know that this is where people can start to present that they're struggling in other areas of their lives. So yeah, a really fascinating session today, a really important one. And do take care of yourselves and your own well-being after hearing, there was a lot to process today. And do come back to it, do access Paul, Dave, and the services that they're representing as well, if ever this comes up. Appreciate you being here today, and hope that you will come along to our next sessions.
Yes. See you on the 9th for our next one.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye.